pleased today to introduce to the city our new superintendent, Thomas Anderson, who's will come up to the mic in a moment, but I'm here also with my colleagues on the New Bedford School Committee, Josh Amaral and Bruce Oliveira, and wanted to recognize our city councilors in attendance, Ian Abreu and Scott Lima. Thanks for being here today, guys. You know, we had, just by way of review, we really had an intensive process to select our new superintendent, and the process began in really in November when our current superintendent, Peter Durkin, announced that she would be resigning her position effective at the end of the academic year. We went about the work of setting up a screening committee, which did a very effective job in vetting some 35 roughly candidates. One of our members is here today, Karen Tredup, who's the principal at Kearney Academy. And we were very proud of their work. They're very transparent and thorough and caring and thoughtful work to generate a set of finalists, all of whom were very qualified for the position, all of whom were subject to what's the term that's been invoked? Like intense vetting. Extreme vetting of sorts, as much as we could muster here in New Bedford, and then of course we had the 4 interviews over the last couple of weeks by members of the school committee. And so the public, and it was one of the things that pleased me in particular, was that those meetings were very well attended by the public. And I say that because, you know, we as a school district have been under scrutiny by the state over the last few years. The state has ended its monitoring, which is a real achievement, but obviously that's not the ultimate goal. Removing ourselves from state monitoring isn't why parents send their kids to a particular school or not. We want parents to be sending their kids to New Bedford public schools so that their kids can live out their own and their parents' aspirations to do a little bit better than their parents, to pursue the American dream in their own way, and hopefully stay right here in our city. That's why we're in this business. It's about building a stronger city, giving people opportunity, and allowing them to thrive. And so that takes, of necessity, community engagement. And that term these days is somewhat cliched, but you know, as we've discussed a number of times along the way, you know, New Bedford needs to, as a community, we need to be flying the plane on our own, not worrying about what the state's saying, not worrying about whether they're complying with, you know, any handful of state ordained requirements. They have their place, but really what we're trying to do is to get the community to own the school system in every respect, and that way it'll be sustainable. That way it'll become a place where parents want to send their children, and that to me is the ultimate test. So in the course of the interviews, we were all impressed with Thomas Anderson, who is the current superintendent in Randolph, Massachusetts, just south of Boston. Let me tell you a little bit about his background, which I think is exemplary, but the background itself doesn't tell the whole story. So he has been the superintendent of Randolph from 2014 to now. He was, before then, the instructional superintendent in the District of Columbia Public Schools from 2011 to 2014. He was the founding principal and executive director of the Larry Hawkins Chicago International Charter School 2 years before that. He was a principal in the Montgomery County Public Schools, one of the largest school districts in the United States, from 2006 to 2010. And he's been a teacher and a coach, an athletic coach along the way, and has ample instructional experience. He is a graduate of Phillips Andover Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Rhode Island and his master's in curriculum and instruction from Howard University in the District of Columbia. His accomplishments in Randolph are significant and really drew the attention of the committee. During his time there, The district, like New Bedford, was a level 4 district, and it exited level 4 in 2017 under his leadership after having been in level 4 for 9 years. The dropout rate went from 9.5% in 2013 to 4.4% in 2017. Again, a very material improvement in the lives of those kids in particular. Student growth on state assessments increased by roughly 3% just over the last year. Again, a very material improvement. Randolph, like our district, is a diverse district with many English language learners, and so that was another facet of his qualifications that struck us. This was a district that had similarities with New Bedford. SAT scores grew at the same time, and that's important as well, and oftentimes we don't talk about that, but at the end of the day, the aspirations of parents are, again, most parents, is to make sure to see to it that their kids do better than they did. That is the classic American aspiration, and part of that is getting into a competitive college of one's choice, and those SAT scores matter in that equation for sure. He did a lot with the operation of the school district, saving considerable money in out-of-district special ed placements and a number of operational areas that allowed the school system to plow those funds back into instruction. Again, very important. So, but as I said earlier, he gave a fabulous interview, right? That's what the public saw, that's what we saw, but I'm here today, and Bruce and Josh are here today, not just because of the interviews, but because of this track record and because of what we've seen when we've dealt with him one-on-one, which is a person who has a strong internal compass, who has got the backbone to make hard decisions, but also the touch to make them in ways that allow people to bring forward their ideas and to try their very best, to feel like they're part of the team. He understands that that educating the youth of any city, of any community, is a collective endeavor, and that you can't go it alone. It can't be an exercise in top-down directives. It has to be more collective. It has to be more engaging. It has to. We need teachers to be part of that program, to be central to that program, to that effort. And that can only happen if they feel like this is a place that validates their efforts, and while maintaining a level of accountability that every student and family in the city deserves. So, we're at a point now in our history of our school department that, again, where a lot has been built in the last few years. The place is completely different, as many have noted, including the state, than it was in 2011, and we're proud of that. And we also know that turning around an urban school district is not an overnight exercise. There are pieces in place now that can be built on, and that's the job of the next superintendent, and we have somebody who, in our view, in our unequivocal view, is capable of doing that, and we really look forward to the work ahead. It's really great that you applied. It's great that you're coming aboard. We're really looking forward to the hard work ahead, and we have the classic. So it's not just professional sports teams that do this for their high draft picks, but we have a little something for you that will. Doesn't have a number on it, but
Thank you very much.
Now, so I don't want to mislead people. We are on. We will do the contract negotiations as we normally would. I don't want people to think that he's going to get a 9-figure salary as a result of this. So don't get me wrong. But anyway, I want to introduce to you our new superintendent, Thomas Anderson.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. I definitely appreciate it's more than appreciation, it's humbling to have the opportunity to hear people discuss the work that you've been doing, especially in those terms. I know that as educators, we're tremendously passionate about what it is that we do every day and all the work that's continuously done, for the students and for the community and for the families, everyone that's there who has an interest in education as a whole. So, again, I'm looking forward to it. We'll get started on July 1st. We still have some other things I still have another job that I'm doing right now, and to make sure, that the dedication you have there, you leave in, you tie things together, you do what's right, make sure that I want to make sure, the things that we've started in Randolph, I'm able to conclude, make sure people are, in place, all the things that we had planned on doing, so the transition would be nice and smooth. But I think it was really open up for questions, or did you want to?
Well, I'll just ask
I'll talk, I'll try to be brief. I was happy to be on the screening committee, which I think was a really important step, and I want to thank Karen Chartup and all the other folks that were part of the screening committee. We saw a large selection of candidates. I think we interviewed 9 total candidates. So we saw all 4 finalists, and we had ample opportunity to compare them to other people. I could say that Thomas was my #1 pick at that point in time. And then as you go through the interview process, you see other candidates, you want to give them, a fair shot as well. But by the end of the process, Thomas came in as the 4th person we interviewed in public, and I thought really stole the show. And as the mayor said, it wasn't just his interview that sold it, but in the sense of vetting, certainly the background check stuff in Randolph and talking to school committee members there, members of the community, folks that are on their town council or select board, other folks throughout the state who know him all spoke very well of him. In fact, when I first met Mr. Anderson in person for coffee, as part of the day he was in the district, he started telling me about his family and the structure of his family, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I know, I know. I've already uncovered all this. So I think the committee made a really wise choice. I think we've done a lot of work in the last 5 years to fix things in the district and to get to this position. And I think Thomas is the perfect person to now build on those things and create the school system that our community deserves and frankly expects. So I have full confidence in his ability to do that, and I look forward to working with him and getting to know you better and also getting to know your family better and welcome you to the city. Thanks, Thomas. Thank you.
I'm good. I just want to welcome you. I don't have a speech.
Perfect, well said. All right, we'll open it up for questions. Go ahead, Jim.
Mr. Anderson, can you tell us a little bit about what you plan to do for the transition? What steps will you take in the interim and then when you first start?
Thank you. First, in terms of learning as much as I can, so being able to reach out to current staff, learn about the budget process. And I say learn about it because there are similarities, there are differences in terms of what priorities are. So I want to learn what the priorities already are. So for me, it's not about coming in and you don't make change for the sake of making change. So really just digging as deep as I can, learning as much information again about what the priorities are in the budget academically, what structure is already in place. I know there's been a tremendous amount of work over the last few years, and my thing is we don't want things to happen in terms of having unintended consequences about some great idea. It's what are the ideas that exist? What was the time and energy that was spent toward pushing forward whatever the initiatives are? What are those areas that we definitely need to continue? But seeing internally, we have a staff. New Bedford has been around for years and years. So it's not as though there's something that is magical and you walk in and everything's starting all over from scratch. So really that's what it is when we talk about transition plan, those first days, you get to know people, but those are kind of standard, but it's what are the real questions we're asking, how much real listening. We can hear people, but are we actually listening to what they're saying? Listening to what the students are saying in terms of how do we incorporate that in there. Doesn't mean you make every single change that everyone suggests, but really having an open mind and an understanding about what needs to be done in the initial stages.
Are you going to be meeting with the outgoing superintendent?
Yes. Yes, I think that's important. And regardless of any circumstance, I mean, I think that, you've had someone who's led the district for however long that person's been here. And if she's open to having a discussion, which I think she is, I think there's a lot to be learned from, the previous experience.
What appeals to you about this position, and why did you want to come to New Bedford?
I mean, New Bedford is, of course, you could say it's a great city. We know about the history and those type of things, but really looking into, I can see the commitment, the level of diversity in population, diversity in thought, and not being far in a place like Randolph. There are so many similarities. A big difference is size, but I was in districts that were 48,000, 150,000. Chicago is 400,000. So it's to scale. It's all relative. But those are the places that I'm used to being in. I think size-wise, New Bedford still offers a lot of opportunity, but it's still the right size for me as a superintendent, where I can still feel comfortable to be able to have that type of impact and really, be able to see the change, be able to really get to know people and know the staff and what's going on in classrooms. That's different than, being in there, and I don't believe you don't micromanage, but you want to know what's there. You allow people to do the job that they're hired to do. You support them, and we kind of work together. And I think that a lot of that foundation was there. And seeing some of the other work from the city side, as far as the mayor's office and the council, so that dedication to continue to bring the district, to a level that everyone believes where it should be.
If parents and students are home watching this tonight on the news, what would your message to them be?
The future is bright. There's been a lot of great things put in place. Again, I'm always going to say you don't make change for the sake of making change. We'll have great opportunities to get to know one another over the course of, so many years, but definitely over the next, after July 1st, some of those days. But I'll have opportunity to come in over the next several weeks before the end of the year to engage with, staff, with parents, and, some other events like that.
Okay, anybody else? All right. Oh, Jack. You're never at press conferences, it's just so unusual to see you here.
I actually had a heyday at press conference. You were lucky enough to avoid.
I know, lucky me.
Mr. Anderson, welcome to New Bedford.
Thank you.
New Bedford is a very political place,
Mhm.
Bedford, and one of the school committee members, when they voted to hire you, said that he hopes that your tenure could be a time of healing, because there have been some divisive issues the last few years. I wonder if you could speak to that as to how the district might begin to come together again after some big change.
Okay, thank you. Nice to meet you. I think that, one, there are always challenges. I know you said it's political, and I think it depends how we define what's political. I think we use the word political, and it can come off as something negative. But we also know that everyone has their perspective. They have their, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. They have their own agenda. So what's most important to them? It's critical for me to learn what is important to these individuals. And as a collective group, we have to come together around, my job is to take care of education. Doesn't mean we're forgetting about other things that exist in the city and who is responsible for others, but I think if we can figure out that line, that connection is education. Understand what the values that others have. What's their value system? And we talk about it, and I think sometimes we impose our own values on others before we've had an opportunity to really have that discussion with them. It doesn't matter where we're coming from, what our complexion is, but we all can come from the same neighborhood, look the same, and still have different values, and believe that because we live next door to each other that we should automatically believe the same thing. And we assume versus having that real conversation to really be able to see. We know that we value education. I think everyone values it, but I think we come at it from different angles. And for me, it would be, how do we get together around education and really see? And then the hope would, some of the work I've done in Randolph, we said Randolph was no longer level 4, but had been level 4 for over 9 years, but with no level 4 schools. So it was an interesting discussion to have coming in, learning why that was, and it was really some of the dynamics between some of the governing bodies in the town, because they had that structure. What I was able to do, and we continue to do, is just, again, we're coming together on education. What are our goals and objectives individually? And then try to, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't want to say, hey, there's magic and snap my finger and we're going to suddenly get everyone together, we're going to laugh and smile and everyone's, that's naive to think of it like that, but that's the objective, to be able to get people in the same room or building and really be able to have honest conversations about what is it that we value and why. Thank you.
I was just going to say, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a person? Where are you from originally, and what made you want to get into education?
All right. So I'm originally from East Hartford, Connecticut. So I did graduate from Phillips Andover, but I also went to public schools throughout. I went to Andover for my last year, so I went to public schools in East Hartford, Connecticut. I started playing football when I was 9, ran track for 4 years at University of Rhode Island. Played football the first couple of years there. I have my daughter's here with me today. She's 12. She's in 7th grade. I have twin boys that are 16. They're juniors, and my wife happens to be on travel today. So we have a balanced life. Both of us work. A little bit of a convenience. Her office happens to be at home, but we do a lot of juggling. So I do. As a person, it's a real family. We do our own laundry, all those kind of things. I cook dinner, I do all that kind of stuff. We balance getting home. I made a promise to her that we do some things today. She didn't have school, so she's appeasing me by coming for a little while with this. But when we think about education, I'll share a little bit about this quickly. So my mother is the 16th of 19. So I grew up on a 1,200-acre farm in the deep woods of Mississippi. But most of my aunts and uncles, from an education standpoint, my mother graduated from high school after she had me and coming to Connecticut following an older sister. So when we think about the importance of education, and then, my father, whose last name I have is Anderson, after, when I was in 4th grade, worked in a factory for 40-something years. He still lives in, they're not together, but they still live in Connecticut, the same town in East Hartford. So you learn, I know I may have said something before about you treat people how you want to be treated. So that's the core and the root of things. So as you're going through and thinking about the importance of education, I saw the long hours that, my father would work in factory, and, it was not as though I needed motivation to say that's not something I want to do. The objective was, for us at the time, you're going to college, and that's it. Didn't really know what I was going to do, but what kept me on that track was, I love playing football. I knew that if it didn't take care of doing those things in the athletics, and played the trumpet when I was in 4th and 5th grade, and until I started playing football, I didn't think you could do both. So you kind of learn later that I wish I would have kept playing that. But really, there was a class. I won't leave out any names or anything, but there was a class I was in one day, and it was an English class, and I'm sitting here thinking, as an 11th grader, and I was only 15, that this really isn't how it should be. I still hadn't decided to be a teacher. So you fast forward, I go to college, I end up doing running our athletic study hall. I was a teaching assistant just by chance. Things kind of evolved that way. I ended up having a conversation with my track coach my freshman year about, Coach Copeland is still at URI, some hard workouts that we're doing. So we had a nice little chat about some things, and then just about life in general. We talk about the influence of a coach and those type of people in your lives when they don't know that they have that level of influence on you. And it's funny because I emailed this to him the other day, and he says he posts it on the wall so the other athletes, the new younger guys, can see it and that kind of stuff, which makes you feel really good. But I think that reaching out to him and other coaches I've had and letting them know that you never know the influence that you do have. And as a teacher, and coming full circle, I feel like I'm all over the place with it, but kind of coming full circle and thinking about, you don't do it because you want to be respected in terms of, not say respected, you don't do it because you want to be complimented and publicly, but you do it because of what you believe in. And becoming a teacher and having an opportunity to become an administrator. The superintendent role, honestly speaking, wasn't something that I didn't think I was going to go in that direction, because there's a lot of competing interests, there's a lot of competing factors, and what is important for individuals to know is the world of education is not what everyone thinks it is and what they think it should be. We need to really take a step back and go and get involved in the world of education and really learn what the positions are. And for some, they'll think, well, you get to be the superintendent. It's a great, it's a great position. There has to be someone in that role, but you really have to come through. You know, I was a teacher, I was a coach, I was an assistant principal, I was a principal, I was an assistant assistant superintendent, instruction superintendent. We opened the school in Chicago. I've been able to have that well-rounded, balanced experience just to be able to tap into that toolkit, to have a sense of what it is. By far, it doesn't mean that I think I know everything. But from those other areas, you learn what questions to ask. And I know that there's a tremendous staff here and that strong foundation that will help continue to do things. And so it gives me an opportunity, too, to be able to tap into some of the stories that I can talk about. You know, my father's father was a sharecropper, and my mother's father, you know, he owned all these things, but it was in a world of, you know, it was Mississippi. It was Woodville, Mississippi in the 50s and 60s, and the world was very different. And hearing about, you know, segregation and racism, you know, just all those things that we read about in being able to interact with people that lived it firsthand, that's what pointed out about how can you take what you have learned and being able to just have a conversation with other people. And as long as you're able to reach one person, it's something that, okay, there's that level of accomplishment because you've been able to share some ideas to get people thinking a little bit more broadly, you know, more critically and analytically.
One of the issues in New Bedford, not the only issue, but one of the issues is that it's a approaching, if not already, a majority-minority school system. Very few teachers, percentage-wise, teachers of color, minorities. Do you think you have a particular role to play as an African-American man, as a role model in that kind of system, or is that just something that's beside the fact?
I think that I can't, and I'm very, I say I'm candid about things, but the difference of being candid and blunt and rude. I feel as though, because it's an interesting question, because when I was coming from DC, now it's 4 years ago, it's probably around the same time, apparently there was a similar question, but I wasn't there to answer that question, and someone responded and basically said, one of the reasons I was hired, which for me never should be factored into anything, was because I am, you know, a black male. We know in the world of education there aren't that many black males. In the world of education there aren't that many males. If we break it down even further, there are less Hispanic males, Asian males. So as we go across the board, we need to have a level of diversity for males in general. If we look at the percentage in Massachusetts, we're talking about, make sure I get it, it's at least 80% female to 20% male. And my objective, I'm going to be very clear, is to hire the best people, period. If we're hiring the best people, it should be people who reflect in their thought a level of diversity, regardless if they're male and they're brown or tan. Doesn't matter. We need to make sure we're hiring the best people, period. When it comes to working with teacher education programs, how do we get more people of color into the education profession? I have two younger brothers. I have one that he was a baseball player, so he's 10 years younger, so he owns his own baseball stuff, so he's not an educator. My middle brother, he happens to actually be an educator in the Atlanta area there. But anybody else that I ask, any of my friends in terms of what their children are going to do when they go to college, no one's going into teaching. And when I had people asking me, well, how are we going to expand, you know, that force of people? And so I put it back on them and I said, hey, well, your son or daughter is going to school next year, or, well, going this particular last fall. What are they going to do? Not education. So I give them back the same look they're giving to me. So yeah, the hard question that would come to me to say, well, what are you going to do about that? And I'm thinking, well, we're going to continue to push and expose our students to the various careers that exist to make sure that they know education is it's a great option. It's a viable career, it's a great option, there are things, but we also have to work with all of our policy people, general public, and those type of things to make sure teachers, educators, not just teachers, but educators, period, and especially teachers and support staff, are being respected in the jobs that they have every day. And I think until we can make sure that that's done a little bit more, it's still going to be a challenge to increase the numbers, especially in diversity, because a lot of families, they're seeing from an economic standpoint, and based on what they hear, if my child goes to medical school or become a lawyer or those type of things, financially they'll be better off, as opposed to well, we can do a teacher, we'll go be a teacher because it's a noble profession. So I think as a society, we really need to rethink how that's being done. And
I wasn't thinking so much as to how you hire, how you treat the nurses,
Mhm.
so much as your awareness of, because you are
Mhm,
actually.
mhm. I'm fully aware, yes.
In this area where there aren't that many.
Yeah, yeah.
You've always a role model.
Mhm, mhm.
You take
It's,
all that on.
yeah, and I wasn't trying to be funny, but and I knew what you wanted me to. So it's, I'm fully aware all the time. I think that you're never, in whatever role you're in, you're never off in terms of always doing the right thing. And if you live by that, you're always going to do the right thing anyway. So it's not as though when no one's around, you kind of relax a little bit more. But I'm fully aware of, I'm the only black male superintendent in the state of Massachusetts. So I'm fully aware of that. The two black women, one was my assistant superintendent last year, and she's a superintendent. The other lady is a superintendent in Sharon. So, when we think about that, but there's still a level of, that we need to get to. So I think people are very mindful of that. And I did get some nice complimentary messages over the last couple of days, and one from one did mention about being, a black male role model and appreciated those type of things. So it makes you feel good. I just believe that it's not something special that I should be doing. I think if I'm doing the right thing every day and living by that, people are able to see it, and you have that level of influence, like I mentioned before, that you really don't know, you don't really realize that's there. So good, thank you.
All right. All right, thanks, everybody. Lots of work
Bunny. I got a call that you had a basket of Easter eggs stolen. Did you lock your car door? Don't worry, Bunny, I'll get them for you. 11 to control. I spoke to one of Bunny's neighbors. Can you put out a bolo, please, for 2 white males, all dressed in black, wearing black masks, in possession of a red basket full of Easter eggs? Here, Bunny, I'm so happy that you're so excited to have your basket back. That's so nice of you, Bunny, but we can't accept gifts.